Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. This 30-minute podcast features a new author interviewed by me every single day, 365 days a year, for about 30 minutes. I am also the publisher for Zibby Books, which publishes 12 books a year in fiction and memoir. Our books are already out now. You can check it out on zibbybooks.com. And we have a magazine called Zibby Mag, where we have lots of wonderful essays and lifestyle features. That's at zibbymag.com. We have classes at zibbyclasses.com. And I recently opened a bookstore in LA called Zibby's Bookshop at 1113 Montana Avenue at 11th Street in Santa Monica. I hope that you are able to enjoy some of our other offerings. But this here podcast is the basis of all of it and started in 2018. And no matter what I do, this is basically my favorite thing. Enjoy. Laurie Frankel is the author of Family, a novel. Laurie is the New York Times bestselling, award-winning author of novels such as The Atlas of Love, Goodbye for Now, and the Reese's Book Club pick, This Is How It Always Is. Laurie lives in Seattle with her husband, daughter, and border collie. She makes good soup. I have to say, I absolutely loved this book, Family. It's one of my top books so far of the year. Welcome, Laurie. Thanks for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss Family. I'll just say it that way.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm thrilled, and I'm thrilled to be here, and I appreciate so much you're doing this.
Of course. Okay, as I was just saying, I'm like obsessed with this book. I love the voice. I love all of it. It's so original. Oh my gosh, it's hilarious. Even all the like malapropisms. I mean, you can't even say that right. I mean, just like all these funny things you do. It's like all the way through. It's just so first rate. I don't know. I loved it. Okay, tell listeners what Family is about.
Oh, first of all, thank you. I appreciate it so much. It's such a weird time after the book has left my hands, but before it's in anyone else's.
Yes.
So it means the world to me. Family is about, it's about a family. And it is about adoption. And it is about not just one adoption, but a lot of different kinds of adoption, which is sort of the idea that I went into it with, and then it proved much, much more complicated than that. There are lots and lots of books about adoption. You know, so often when we talk about lack of representation, we really mean a lack. And that's not the problem with adoption. It's not that there is no representation. It's just that the representation is so negative. And when it isn't negative, it's this like, well, then a miracle occurred and they settled for each other and it wasn't terrible. And I hate that story. So I set out to tell a different one. And it took me a long time to figure out, well, okay, how do you tell a story if your point is that, well, it's not really terrible. It wasn't that these horrible things happened. And that is why there's not just one, but a variety, I guess, of adoptive families in this book. It is also about a movie star, and it is about social media and cancel culture and scandal that we sort of get caught up in and rile up ourselves. And it's about dream jobs and the way in which dream jobs are dreamy, but they are also jobs, and which is something that I think about all the time because I definitely have a dream job, and it is dreamy, but it is also a job.
Well, you achieved your goal in such a creative way, right? By having the main character, I always forget everybody's name. What is her name?
India.
Yeah. Having India, of course, India, there was a whole backstory of that name. Blah, blah, blah. Of course, how did I forget that? Anyway, having India be the movie star who's in a movie about the adoption that's then not with the right depiction. And so it's like this whole meta thing that you get set up. You know, it's funny. I just went to for the screening of All the Light You Cannot See. Yeah. Which, have you been watching that? I don't know.
I haven't yet because the book was so good, and I just thought,
I know.
Oh, is it going to do it justice? I don't know. So I will, but I haven't worked up to it yet, I think.
Yeah. Well, I was like out in a place, like I had to go see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I was like a little reluctant. It's really good. But anyway, the star was there and she's low sight. Yeah. And so she was talking exactly as you are about representation. And she's like, all the depictions of, you know, no sight or low sight people have you like with this cane and this and that. Like, this is not what it's like. It doesn't have to be the story. She's like, I don't look spacey and like, you know, that I can't, you know, and it's just what you're saying. Like, it doesn't have to be a sob story. And where are the flip sides? Why is there only one narrative?
Yes, exactly. Where are the flip sides? Why is there only one narrative? Yeah. And I think some of the answer to that question is narrative involves misery. Like there have to be low points in order for you to go up again. There has to be this arc. It's like by definition.
Right.
And that just means you have to find a different way to tell about it and to talk about it. And I also think these are complicated, complex issues, which makes them really wonderful things to talk about for 400 pages, but not for 400 characters.
Right.
I think they don't lend themselves well to sound bites or to posts. I need 10 hours from you. I need you to sit down and like let me tell you a story. And that makes it a wonderful thing to write a novel about, but also that's a high bar, basically.
Well, but when you put it that way, that you need like 10 hours, I'm like, oh, no, I don't have 10 hours for you.
That's right. Yeah.
But, but then when you read it and your chapters are also short and punchy, like your time like disappears.
Yeah.
Like reading time is not like regular time, because when you're reading something good, you lose the clock entirely, and that's kind of what this book does. It's like you can't sleep and you want to finish and so
yay.
It also doesn't feel like 400 pages, because that would also be like forget that too, but it's these short sections all linked together. It's almost, I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. I hope so. And I feel exactly that way. As a reader, I want it to move. I want to be turning the pages. And if it does, you can take as long as you want. But if I'm slogging through it, then I feel like, no, we got to pick pace.
Yeah.
Because you're right. 10 hours is a lot of time to ask of someone. And especially now, but probably always. And when you put it like that, like, okay, give me 10 hours and we'll do this thing. And your immediate reaction is, no, I don't have 10. What do you, I don't have 10 hours. Yeah. And so I think, as writers, we have to earn it.
Yeah. It's really amazing anyone reads anything when you put it that way.
It is really amazing. It is. And I'm therefore so grateful to people for doing it. And myself, I do spend almost all my time reading books. So, so I feel like, okay, I know what that transaction is.
How did you come up with the characters? Were you ever into acting? I feel like it's so deep into that world as well, that whole like aspirational and wanting to act but not being able to sing, and having just, even when India realizes like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm meant to do. Not everybody has that feeling.
No, not everybody has that feeling. And so I'm a theater fan. I'm a deep I love the theater. I love musical theater. I love musicals, unlike India. I love plays. I love the theater. I always have. I cannot sing, but it turns out I also cannot act. So that's pretty much going to be a barrier for me to be doing. It is really interesting, I think, to love something as an audience member and have no sense of wanting to or being able to do it yourself. Mm-hmm. And for me, that contrasts with reading, which I also am a huge fan of, and I'm doing all the time. And eventually that spilled over into wanting to do it myself, wanting to write books myself. And that's not on the table for me for theater. And so in some ways it's this, I don't know, it's a pure love. It is just something that I have always loved, but never aspired to. Maybe. Mm-hmm. It's also true that my academic background is in Shakespeare. And so I have all of this, and I taught play writing, and I've taught play reading, I've taught drama, theater, all of that stuff, like from an academic standpoint. And that's very, very different, but it did give me a place to start as far as research went. And it's super fascinating research. It is an interesting world to be immersed in from that perspective. So all of that was a pleasure.
So then when was your first attempt at fiction?
One of the things that I think is interesting is that, how do I want to say it? I am a novelist, like consummately. Like I think the way people want to give you their star signs, I am a novelist, like in this kind of core of my being sort of way. It's what I want to read and it's what I want to write. So I had tried to write short stories, which seems like the entry point. I mean, and the kind of most direct answer to your question, but I didn't want to write short stories. I wanted to write novels. And I think that you cannot know whether you can write a novel until you have actually already written a novel. Mm-hmm. It is a really difficult thing to sit down and try to do because they're long and they take a really long time. So, I think if you want to know if you can write a sonnet, you can sit down and try to write a sonnet. I think if you want to know if you can write fiction, you can sit down and write a short story. And it might take weeks and it might take months. but like, okay, that's a tackleable sort of a goal. I just think it isn't true with long form. So I did not know that I could do it until I had already done it. I was teaching in Baltimore, and then I fell in love with a person in Seattle and moved out to Seattle, where I am still, and got a teaching job out here. And I had this block of time, like 6 months between jobs for the first time in my life, that I had time to actually sit down and say, is this something I can do? I have no idea. And I figured it out by after I had done. I had read 10,000 novels, and that seems like pretty good training, but I just don't think there's any way to know whether you can get from the beginning to the end of the thing without doing it.
Very true. When you were structuring this novel, who came first? Fig, India, one of the other characters? Like, or did it all just sort of come together?
Yes, it's such a good question. So India used to die in the first sentence of the book.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I know, which is really remarkable given that she's certainly the heart of this novel. And I don't think it's really much of a spoiler to say that she lives through it, but she did not used to. And she was always a huge part of the book, but she was kind of hanging over it because we knew that she died. And simply, it was just too sad. And she had too much life in her. And it colored the book in a way that it was too costly. But therefore, I had her kids too. So Fig also, like, they came together. I had Fig's voice in my head from the beginning because she's 10. And so her voice is very distinct, and she's very smart 10-year-old, precocious and smart 10-year-old, which is how I like my kids. And therefore, that voice is really clear, and I think easier to write because of that, and you empathize with her immediately because she is a child and she is smart and curious, and originally because she had lost her mom. And so, well, pretty much everything else about this book changed over the course of it. I mean, I cut 300,000 words from this thing.
What?
I cut 300,000 words from this book. That's nearly 3 times as many words as remain. It has 2 timelines, one of which I dragged to the trash can and redrafted from scratch. And so,
wow. Which one?
Well, the past one, because as I say, I'm sorry, the present timeline, because she used to die, and then we had this whole, aftermath. So we were getting the story of her past leading up to her death, and then we saw her legacy. And so that had to go. I mean, it just had to go. It is also true that I started this book on March 3rd, 2020. So it was really, it went really well for a week. And then my kid came home from school for a year and a half. Like, the whole world got derailed. And I think there's no way to have been writing something and not have that get derailed as well. So yeah, everything changed.
Well, to your writing of Fig as a 10-year-old, I have a 10-year-old daughter. And so this was like spot on, and I have boy-girl twins who are older. They're 16. But anyway, there were like so many things. I was like, she got that right. Yep. That one. Yep.
Awesome.
So
yes, I love that note. Thank you. That's great.
Even like the agent character, the sense of humor in this very subtle, but I chuckle out loud multiple times. It's not like you're not doing slapstick. It's like this very sophisticated but hilarious comedy that, like, you have to know the words that are, it's just so great. It's like a hidden code or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, you might miss it, but
thank you. Yes, thank you. I love that. Yeah. I hope so, because that too, I think, contributes to what you're talking about. I want to earn your 10 hours. I want you to be amused.
Yeah. So do you like make yourself laugh when you're writing? Like, do you chuckle at all?
I don't think I do, but I see the jokes coming, and I think, oh yeah, that's gonna work. That's gonna be good. and they come to me just a few lines before they come into my head, maybe a few lines before they actually come out of my fingers. And I think, yeah, okay, that's gonna be nice. That's gonna work. Once I've established the characters and edited them and revised them a lot, they start to talk. And so I hear them, and they surprise me as if I were reading it. And that's, I feel like that's what you're writing to get to that point where the characters are amusing you.
Interesting. Did you work alongside your editor? I mean, I know this is not your first book. Like, did you You're wearing a shirt that says edit. So, or is this like to go through that many words and changes and all of that? Like, I feel like to do that alone in a room, you'd tear your hair out, you know?
Yes, there's definitely some tearing of hair. I did work with my editor a lot, and she is a person who has a lot of notes, and we do go back and forth. But I did almost all of that 300,000 words of cutting before she saw it. I had done most of the major overhauling before I sent it out to her, because I don't want her to, I like her. I want her to think well of me. I don't want her to see it until it's really pretty good. And it wasn't working. I mean, sometimes I think like, okay, this is working, but it could be better.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will do those large edits, but I have to talk myself into them more. This one, I didn't have to talk myself into, because it just was not working. I was having to do a lot of, because it was the present timeline, I was having to do a lot of machinations, because the world was changing every morning. I woke up and it was somewhere different. And you're like, oh, well, you can't have the scene at school because school is closed. Oh, we can't have the scene in a coffee shop because coffee shop is closed. Oh, those people can't run into each other at the grocery store. It's grocery store. I mean, it was like that level of thing.
Yep.
But also, it was just admitting to myself, look, I can't kill this woman. So I have to find some other way of telling this story. I will say, though, that I am an editor. I am a person who writes really terrible drafts and then iterates them, just write them again and again and again and again and again until they get better. And it is frustrating, and it is not a linear approach to novel writing, I think, or human being, or really any of those things. If I could do it a different way, I certainly would, because there is that hair tearing, but I can't.
That's just the way it is.
That's just the way it is.
I found it really interesting, and this is part of the flipping the narrative we were talking about earlier. When India's going through all these birth mom like albums, right, and scrapbooks, and learning everything, and then finding the one that's different, and the way she talked to Camille. She's like, I don't want these letters that are like, oh, I'm going to take, I'm going to be a dear mom. Like, I'm going to take it. She's like, this is your child. Like, don't even talk to me about it like that. And that's something that I hadn't read either. Tell me about that.
Yeah. And that is exactly why, because you haven't read that either. And I hadn't read that either. One of the things, there are a lot of implicit assumptions, I think, about adoption that we're not looking at very closely, and for a lot of reasons. And I think it isn't serving anyone to make those boxes really narrow. I don't think anyone is ever served by really narrow boxes. I feel like this is my fifth novel. They're very different from one another, but like, this is what I'm always on about, is like wider ranges of normal make the world a better place for everyone. In the case of adoption, and in the case of like birth moms in particular, I think it is all really well-intentioned and trying to hold space for and trying to honor. And yet I think we are often doing people a disservice when we say, like, this is how you must feel. This is how you are always going to feel. This is how this is going to go. And I just think it's dehumanizing, because everyone else might feel any different number of different ways about anything at all. Whereas we say, like, birth mothers have to feel this way in this order about this thing, and that's the only thing that's acceptable. There are lots of reasons for that, and they are really loving reasons in a lot of ways. But I think they're ignoring human complexity and confining people in ways that I think are not serving anyone in the equation. And so I wanted to look at it more deeply and more complexly. Complexly, is that a word? More complicatedly, more closely. And I guess, and again, I think this is the beauty of novels, like, from a character perspective, not from a policy perspective, not from a social media perspective, not from a 1,200 word article perspective. Like, let's really look at this and look at this person as a person, see where we are.
I love that. Oh my gosh.
Thank you. Thank you.
Where are you, by the way, with your next book? Do you hate when people ask you that?
I don't hate when people ask me that. But in this case, it is a complicated question. I mean, at the moment, because I'm in this kind of pre-pub place, I'm mostly doing stuff for this one still. I have started the next one. I have always started the next one. I feel like novels are really daunting. And if you don't start the next one, then you will never start. You stand at the bottom of the mountain, you're like, no, that's too tall. I can't. So I feel like it is good and useful to always be in the middle of something new. But it is also true that because I revise so much and so thoroughly, probably wouldn't tell you what it's about anyway, because I'm superstitious. Writers are superstitious and weird about things like that. But if I did, you come back and say, like, what happened to that novel? And I'd be like, oh yeah, no, that's something else completely and entirely, because they go through these huge changes.
Wow. Well, it's good to know that's normal though. Right?
I guess, yes. I never know whether people find this heartening or really demoralizing. And
I find it, personally, I find it heartening, okay. So that's good.
Yeah, that's really good. It's really good.
You said you're just a really huge reader. And you only read fiction. So what are some of your all-time favorites, or something recently that you've read, recently that you love?
Let's look at my many books on my bookshelf. This is the book I'm recommending to everybody these days.
I keep hearing great things about it. Is it really amazing? Okay.
So amazing. I read it years ago because the publication on this one has been so slow, and now I'm reading it again, and it's just fantastic. I mean, it's fantastic the first time. It's fantastic the second time. It's timely. It's amazing.
We must not think of ourselves.
It takes place in the Warsaw Ghetto. So it's historical fiction. It is World War II. It is not cheerful, but it is hopeful. It is not a depressing book. It is a remarkable book because you know how it ends, but also you know how it ends. It is a book about people who are keeping one person in particular who is keeping an archive. And that is a true story. And that archive survives. And you know that it survives because you're reading about it. And so it is a really remarkable book. I love all of her books, and that is the best one. So, take that. I am also recommending to everybody Naomi Alderman's new book, The Future. She's another one I love. Everything she's ever written. I did not think that she could top The Power. I felt like The Power was an essentially perfect book. This book it blew my mind. I mean, it blew my mind. It was one of these books where like every 3 pages or so I had to put it down and go, okay, what? I mean, there's that level of thing. It's very smart. It's about tech billionaires behaving badly, and the rogue geniuses who want to fix it. And it is epic in scope, and she too manages to do it. I mean, it's 350 pages, 400 pages. It's just, and you can't stop turning them. I'm recommending this book to everyone. In the well of all-time favorites, this book, We're All Completely Beside Ourselves, Karen Joy Fowler. It's a book I recommend to everyone who will sit still long enough to listen. If people have not read this book, the thing to do is to read it without reading anything about it. Don't read the reviews. Don't read the back. Don't even look at the cover if you can help it. Just because it's got a twist and you want to preserve it if you can, though it's really fantastic even if you know it. She's definitely in my like all-time favorites. I mean, gosh, I could do this all day long.
I know. I was like, you should have your own show. I'm just sitting here watching it. This is great.
Yeah, I really, all day long, I could do this. Percival Everett is someone I am forever recommending to people to read. The Trees is another one that just, I mean, speaking of funny, this book is laugh out loud funny book about lynching and race in America. And gosh, that is, a remarkable combination. He's amazing. This is a man with 30 some novels. He writes like one a year. They are unlike anything else I ever read by anybody else. The one that's coming out next year is called James. It's Huck Finn from Jim's. It's amazing. He's amazing. He's amazing. Anyway, as I say, I could do this all day long. So you should cut me off. But
no, I know. I'm going to just come to you for all my book recommendations. This is great.
The world would be a better place if people would just read what I told them to, I think.
Do you do anything? Do you post your lists and make a whole thing about it?
I don't actually. I mean, I'm asked often enough in ways like this. And so, and I'm always still to tell, and I Zoom with a lot of book clubs, and they always ask that question. And that's a really good question for book clubs to ask. But I don't have any sort of I don't know. It would be a good thing to do, like a Substack or something like this, where I just every month told people what they should read.
You should. Let me know. I can help you set it up.
Awesome. Thank you. That'd be awesome.
Okay, I know you've already given a lot of advice, but if there's one more piece that an aspiring novelist out there should know, or even just somebody working on a follow-up who's just like adrift or whatever, what is your advice?
Well, and you are adrift, because I think one of the unfortunate things about novel writing is that what you learned writing the last one doesn't actually help you with the next one, because they're so different from one another. That's not an uplifting piece of advice. I have two, I think. One is read everything. And that's everyone's best advice. And it's because it's the best piece of advice. A thing I tell students all the time is the advice that you're given about writing, all of it, take it or leave it. It works for the person who's given it to you. It may very well have absolutely nothing to do with your process, except that one. You got to be reading. There's no point otherwise. You figure out what it is that you might read that is going to drive and steer your writing usefully for you. It's not like if you're writing this, you have to be reading this and this and this and this, but you got to be reading something in order to support the process and the voice and the whole idea of it. I just think it's non-negotiable. I feel like personally, I am always writing about what I am reading. And I find that practice to be when I'm teaching people how to write, and therefore they have to do what I say. I make that part of the curriculum. And this is the other one, edit. That's the other piece of advice is like, to fear not the fact that your draft is crap. It's going to be crap for a while. You can make it better, and you will. And that too is not like, oh, I'll just go through it one or two more times and then everything will be fine. I think it takes me hundreds of times of going to the beginning and writing through to the end and fixing things and going back to the beginning and writing through to the end. But that's okay, because that is part of the process. So that is my other piece of advice. Don't despair, edit.
Love it. Laurie, thank you so much. Thank you for the thought-provoking entertainment and all of it from Family. And yeah, I am a huge new fan, and I'm sorry I'm only coming to you now, but I'm delighted. I feel like I've discovered this gem that everyone knew about, and they're all like, well, yeah, of course. I'm like, okay, fine. I was just late to the party.
Welcome. And thank you so much, Zibby, for doing this. This is a pleasure. You are a delight. I'm thrilled and grateful.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Bye, Laurie.
Bye.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.